So this took a while because I found out making a version of CTMC that supports the old configurations and the new flying tank configuration got kind of convoluted. All jokes aside, Fin Helicopter is probably one of the least uncomplicated things you could build. And with that warning, let us proceed. Okay, now we're gonna go over the installation because it's a bit convoluted. So here we are on the GitHub, and well, there's 2 chips required to have a working vehicle, so let's just go get them. So the first thing we're gonna want is the rotor creator. I'm actually going to take the single rotor creator. So all we need to do is copy this, go to Gary's mod, and we should just be able to hit Control S or save as. And what you'll notice is if I refresh all of my 2 chips, we have this Whirlwind interfaces folder, and there's our rotor single chip. So this slash actually makes a folder. Now it's giving us a warning, but we're not going to worry about that right now. There's one other we need. So we have the single rotor creator. We also need the single rotor controller. So let's see, controller, single rotor. Let's take this one. We're going to make a new tab, select everything, and just hit Control V. And we can, again, go ahead and hit Control S. And once we update the chips again, we can see that one is over here. Now what happens if we try to spawn these? Well, we'll start with the rotor creator. Errors out, could not find include. Single rotor controller, could not find include. Okay, let's go deal with that then. So here we have a bunch of interfaces. We have all the ones we want for now. So these are the cores. Documentation is not required, but it's nice to have for me in particular. So yeah, let's get the core. This is the controller core. We'll go ahead and copy. Make another tab. Save this. And interesting about the cores is those appear under a new folder, just Whirlwind. So we're gonna go ahead and get the rotor controller core now. Like so. Again, new file, save it, and now we have the rotor controller core. Now, interesting thing about the cores are, these are include files, so you should not really ever have to look at these or edit them, unless you're making some heavy modifications or something. So we really never need to look at these again because they will be included into the other chips. So this is where we typically make all of our changes. So let's go ahead and spawn the rotor creator now. It's just fine, very nice. And let's go ahead and spawn the controller now. So that's erroring out again. This is actually working as intended. So that errors out because the controller depends on the creator. So we take rotor out table, wire that to the rotor creator. Refresh the chip, and it's happy now. But the one thing I really want to grab is the debug example. So yeah, this chip doesn't do anything. This is just a nice copy paste if you want to see some output information. Just gonna save it. Alright, we have everything we need. Alright, now we're gonna set up a single rotor helicopter in ACF-3. So here we go. I have one of those demo helicopters spawned, and I've unwired everything, and I'm gonna wipe some of these settings, but let's go ahead and take a look at this setup. Let's start with the weights. So I have a base plate here. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into the weight, just something heavy enough. We have our main rotor hub, probably a bit too heavy, tail rotor hub. Now another thing I like to do is edit the inertia a little bit so you can see what I've given it versus the default. So a bit of a bump on the x-axis. Rotor hub for sure I like to edit the inertia on because reasons. Tail rotor bumped it up as well quite a bit. We have a gearbox setup, so because we're on ACF-3, I think the linking angles are a bit different. Wow. Is that even going through there? I don't think that was like that. That's interesting. We'll ignore that. But yeah, both of the engines join into the main rotor. They also join into the tail rotor. And we got fuel. What else? Yes, my engines are wired. You could wire these to active on your pod controller if you really want, but I have that wired to a button. When the helicopter is running, the RPM of the engines is going to be kept stable as much as possible. There's a governor built in, and I am governing my engines to 5,000 RPM. But this constant value is also important. So the gear ratios on these just splitter gearboxes is 1. When we get to the main rotor, we're going to be shooting for, let's say, 5,000 divided by 10. Well, that's 500, and then divided by 1.5. It's going to be somewhere around 400 something RPM, which is what I want. For the tail rotor, it's going to be a bit higher. So 5,000 divided by 7.5. I think it was like 700-800 RPM. That's fine. So let us begin with the rotor creator. We'll just wire these things up first. So main rotor goes to the prop, tail rotor goes to that prop. We have blades 1 through 3, and we have a base plate, which I'm just going to wire up. Now, one fun thing is that, okay, these chips are irrelevant. Get them on now. So yeah, when you open these, you can just select the main and just hit OK. That menu is a little bit annoying, but one thing you can do is turn off the debug. So yeah, this chip does technically need to be aligned. Tail rotors don't have to be aligned, but the base plate does, and it's the typical alignment. The X needs to point forwards, the Y needs to point left, and the Z needs to point up. For the rotor, it's not particularly specific. The Z needs to point up, and that's about it. But we can take a look at this chip. So you can see there's a configure base plate function that I'm not using because the default alignment is basically a 0 angle. Here's my rotor alignment already put in. Yeah, some other things, but you can see I've set up a rotor that takes 3 blades, which is why I have 3 blade inputs. So let's go ahead and spawn those. I'm gonna use these. So yeah, you don't have to position these, the chip will do it for you once you wire them. Correction, once you wire them and update the chip. You can just refresh this. And there we go. The debug hollows are funny. So there's an additional alignment for the blades themselves. The prop rotation after their position, but I'm not entirely sure. Oh. Yeah, you can see. We're not going to make any forbidden windmills, so let's just put that back to 90. And yeah, this is the radius, or the center position along the circle of the blades, so we can bring those in if we want, but I'm gonna leave it to 144. And we can turn off debug, we're done with it. So that's pretty much the long and short of this chip. Now, I know I want my rotor to rotate counterclockwise. So when we apply the fin, let's take a look at the settings. Standard airfoil. The only thing I'm really looking at is this low pass filter. We want to make sure that's on. I believe it gets reset every time you reopen Gary's mod, but yeah, so we want the forward to be rotating counterclockwise in this circle. And that should be it. Our rotor is set up. So remember, the controller is going to error out unless you have the rotor out wired to the rotor controller. So we can refresh it, it's not going to do anything. I have it set up to take in 2 engines on this vehicle, so engine left, engine right. Main rotor goes again to the main rotor. Main rotor gearbox, which one is this? Because we have like 20,000 gearboxes. This goes to your last gearbox that has all your ratios and things. Alright, we got tail rotor. And tail gearbox. Once again, the last gearbox with all the ratios and stuff. While we're at the tail rotor, I should mention, let's take a look at the fin settings. This is a Fin3 propeller. The blade pitch doesn't matter because it's going to get overwritten in the chip. And we can see I have a 3 meter propeller here, which is the only thing we'll take note of. Pod controller. And our target RPM, this is that constant value from earlier. So let's take a look at this chip, and I'm going to wipe all the things that you should retune. So that's going to be here in configure shaft. This second slot and third slot I'm going to get rid of. And this one, this should really be 7 by default, but I've already uploaded onto the Google Drive now, so that's basically an AOA limit. On the tail gearbox, once again, for configure shaft, we're gonna reset this. We're also going to, make sure your diameter is set properly, but we're going to get rid of the torque multiplier. This is something that should be tuned. And all of these settings, I'm probably not going to go over. Those are more control related. So what happens when we try to fly this thing? Now let's see. So yeah, by default there is no information coming out of the ship. That's interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, whoops. So 0 is not the null position for the second number in here. That's going to be your clutch multiplier. Don't think about it too hard, but in configure shaft, the off position is 1 actually. And let's try this again. I shouldn't say off position, but the reset position. There we go. So let's see what happens when we try to fly this. Okay. So yeah, space and shift controls the collective. And to much of my dismay, it flies correctly. So yeah, yaws, pitches, rolls, everything's good. So yeah, this is the thing about ACF-3 in particular. The reaction torque is very weak. So typically what you would do that we don't have to do is mess with these numbers in configure shaft, particularly this one. This is like your clutch multiplier. But the power delivery here is smooth enough, and also typically you would have to slowly or gently increase this to counteract your torque from the tail rotor. But again, what happens if I remove the tail rotor? I mean, you can see it does spin, but that is not a whole lot of reaction torque coming from those two main engines. Okay, granted, it will increase as I really rip the collective, but still, it seems to be just fine riding on the sort of auto stabilizer. Yeah. So that is how to set up a single rotor helicopter in ACF-3. Pretty much. One thing that's kind of important is the sign of your tail rotor. So let's just say hypothetically speaking, my tail rotor was in the wrong direction. What would that look like? Well, let's see. So if I just get up in the air and try to fly, you can see it's sort of stabilizing in the wrong direction, so it's introducing like instability. So if ever you have that happening when you're trying to fly your single rotor helicopter, what you can do is reverse this second number in configure tail, which is the deflection multiplier. And we're back to it being just fine now. Stabilizing and counteracting the weak torque. Alright, here we go. We are in ACE, and we are going to be building a coaxial helicopter. So let's go ahead and take a look at the vehicle, which should be very similar overall. Base plate is the same weight. We now have 2 rotors. They are probably a bit heavy still. And that's long and short of it. Let's take a look at the inertia. It's going to be the same for the base plate, same for the 2 main rotors. And the last important thing was the gear ratios. So the way gear ratios work in ACE is the old ACF2 way. You multiply instead of divide. So once again, I am governing my engines to 5,000 RPM, even though that's outside the power band. 0.07 times 5,000 is going to be around about 370, something like that. I do not have a calculator out. I cannot be bothered, but these are linked. I just have drop mobility ropes off. I can prove it to you. Let's go ahead and link this. Already linked. And yes, it will actually link at that angle because ACE is only the angle from input to output matters, not the sidedness of that. Okay, and you can see my bottom rotor spins. This one's gonna spin counterclockwise. This one's gonna spin clockwise. Now, let's get wiring. There we go, we have top rotor. I'm gonna wire that, bottom rotor, wire that. We have 6 blades and a base plate. Let's take a look at this chip. So once again, instead of a main rotor and tail rotor, you can see I am using the create rotor function twice and the configure rotor function twice. And each rotor has 3 propeller or rotor blades. So you can see 1, 2, 3 for top rotor, 4, 5, 6 for bottom rotor. And we'll go ahead and turn on debug, sure, why not. Base is aligned as before, rotor is aligned as before. These actually have the same orientation. And let's go ahead and get our rotor blades. I was using 192s for this, I think. And does anybody have a stack of cards? Wire these bad boys up. Not sure what the orientation of these props are, but probably shouldn't be assuming their gender in Big 26. Alright, let's go ahead and refresh. Yep, there we go. And I only refreshed it twice because the holograms, the debug holograms don't update, but if you update it one time, the control holograms will be fine. So once again, you can see these blades want to rotate this way. Never mind, you can't really trust all those, but I know that this rotates counterclockwise, this one rotates clockwise, so bear that in mind when you make Fin. And remember, I restarted my game, so this low pass filter has been disabled again. We enable it and we start Fin3ing it up. This one rotates the other way. And we are done with the rotor creator, so let's go ahead and turn off debug. Update it. And to fix the controller, once again, we just wire the rotor creator chip and it's happy. So we can start linking the coaxial controller. Once again, 2 engines, top rotor, top gearbox, which is going to be that last gearbox there, bottom rotor, bottom gearbox, which is going to be that last gearbox, power controller, and our target RPM is going to go to a constant value. So let's scramble the settings in this chip a little bit, the important ones. So notice that I didn't mention this previously, but the way ACF-3 gearboxes and technically ACF-2 gearboxes behaves is a bit different, so there's an option that set it. We're on ACE, so this is not ACF-3, this is going to be 0. The settings I want to scramble, you can see you can do funny things like use little variables. Because we're using 2 basically identical rotors, you know, clutch mole, AOA limit, stuff like that's going to be the same. This too, but I'm not going to touch this. So we'll scramble this, we'll set this to 1, this is the clutch mole, remember. Brake mole, who cares? AOA limit is fine. I believe that is everything I want to scramble. And let's see what happens if I try to fly this bad boy. So yeah, once again, there's no debug information. We're just getting in a seat and seeing what happens. Okay, here we go. So we are a bit difficult to hover without seeing my collective wave. You'll see that the helicopter is jittery. It's not as jittery as it could be, but this is leading me on to the next thing. This has to do with the way, honestly, ACF-3 and ACE power delivery. And you'll notice that it's not as bad because I have a bunch of inertia on my main rotor hubs. So could probably be a bit lower, but what is happening is we are being kind of screwed by the power delivery. So yeah, the debug example chip, I love this one. We're going to find the main rotor extra information. We're going to copy these outputs. And we're going to come to here at those outputs, make sure there's no white space. Come down here, copy the stuff in update function. We need to find update function, which is going to be a bit far down in the do not touch this area, but we'll just mark this off. Drop that stuff here, and we'll be able to see some information. So yeah, there you go. I can see everything basically, but the value I'm looking for is MR delta. So you'll see that value is jumping around as much as the vehicle is jumping around the clutch too, but the clutch is, I'm not paying attention to that. So what do we do? Well, basically what we're doing with the clutch is we are smoothing it to make the power delivery smoother, which is really important for, I guess, ACE in particular. ACE has more reaction torque, I know that much. So what do we do with the clutch multiplier to start off with? Well, we're going to make this a very small number, so we'll try 0.001 or something. Maybe I should not have used that number to start with because I know it kind of works, but... So what you'll see is that MR delta, this is like the difference in RPM of what the rotor is and what it should be based on the gear ratio. But you'll see that the vehicle isn't jerking around anymore, left and right, about the axis of rotation. So, okay, this is good. Now, one kind of annoying thing is you don't want it to slip too much because right now we've lost like 150 RPM, that's what that is. And it is kind of a balancing act. If it goes positive, that means it's overspeeding, but overspeeding is, who cares, basically. I mean, I do, but for the sake of the tutorial, we don't really care about overspeed. So what we can do is, we want the delta to be as low as possible, but we don't want it to be jerky. So what we can do is we can try, okay, 0.005. Go ahead and apply this. You can see it's a bit shaky. This is too much. Already too much clutch slipping. Or not enough clutch slipping. So the lower this number, the more your clutch slips. So let's try 2.5. Just half it. So yeah, unfortunately there will be slip, but we need to smooth out the power delivery pretty much. So yeah, you can spend a bunch of time tuning this. I'm gonna leave it there. And now I want to talk about the yaw of a coaxial helicopter, and for this I'm gonna get some more debug information. So yeah, we're kind of done with the clutch multiplier. You could mess with the brake multiplier to reduce overspeed, but again, who cares? So what we're gonna do now is, I guess we're done with this. We're going to take, I want this torque value, so we're gonna replace this. Actually, we're not gonna replace it. We're just gonna add it to the bottom. So yep, this is my cordoned off section. We're gonna add it here. Update. So the torque number, you can see it there. Now, to yaw a coaxial helicopter, what I basically want to do is I want to make a torque differential, because the way you yaw a coaxial helicopter is basically by using the reaction torque from your engines. And okay, we use differential collective, but if the engine isn't running, you're not going to get any yaw. So the one variable I don't want to touch, really, because I'm not entirely sure how to tune it. This just seems to be, for the most part, a magic number. What this is actually, by the way, is negative 0.001. That's what the 10 to the negative 3 is. That's how many decimal places over. But this is the number that seems to work for ACE. So if we were to come down here, we can say we're using differential yaw. We have a sort of a PID controller, but when we yaw, we're basically saying, hey, this is the target torque difference I want. This is the limit. Now, I don't need to update anything. So you can see I am able to yaw, and you can see the torque difference I'm actually getting. This is dependent on the angle of attack. In this case, it's directly related to my collective, so at very low collective values, I cannot yaw. I'm at 0 collective right now. At very high collectives, I can use more of my my target torque difference, but yeah, this is the thing about coaxials. It's kind of annoying. And I guess I can say, so yeah, that magic number sort of at the start here in configure rotor collective, that is differential mole. This is basically the amount of collective used per like torque number. So per, in ACE this goes up to like a lot. So like in the thousands, like 2,000, 4,000. So you can imagine 0.001 times 4,000 is that much collective. About 4 degrees at 4,000, 2 degrees at 2,000, something like that. In ACF-3, this value is much bigger. This is more like just straight up -1 because the reaction torque is weaker in ACF-3. But that is the long and short of how you set up a coaxial helicopter. Honestly, might even be a good idea to have an additional tail rotor on your coaxial helicopter if you really want tight yaw control. But yeah, that is basically it. Alright, now that's the long and not so short of it all. So you can build coaxial helicopter, single rotor helicopters, and yeah, those are basically the only properly working configuration. You can build tandem helicopters and those like weird side-by-side tandem helicopters, but the yaw does not work. It turns out it's a little bit more complicated than just differential collective. So yeah, so the chip was designed with modularity in mind. So you can see I have a list of possible functions in both of the interfaces. So these are kind of not set in stone. Even the inputs and outputs, you can add whatever you want. But when you use the function, you just make sure it has the proper information, basically. So yeah, there's the functions. There's making the rotors and configuring them. There's also sort of like this API for figuring out what does what. The documentation, I guess. In actuality, probably I'm going to be the only one who uses these to try to make autopilots and things. Also, I have 3 different helicopters for both versions, ACF-3 and ACE. So those are going to be a single rotor coaxial helicopter and also a single rotor mouse steer demo. And I do say demo because the mouse steer is, again, more of showing that, okay, something like this is possible if you really, really want to. Not a huge fan of mouse steer myself. The default you get is actually an auto hover, also bound to H, but honestly the auto hover is not that great either, especially if you don't use the AOA offset for collective. AOE collective is AOE. It changes the way the collective behaves. Okay. But yes, it is possible to have mouse steer, and I've included a few working mouse steer. Yeah, single rotor helicopters. The yaw on the coaxial helicopters just isn't great. But yep, this is flying with mouse steer controls and also WASD and overrides. Those are once again going to be on a Google Drive. There will be links in the description and also the pinned comment because you are animals. Finally, if you run into any problems, let me know. We'll try to fix those. I didn't go over every setting in the chip, so you will probably run into problems. And also, this is Gary's mod, so you will run into problems anyway. But all that being said, have fun and I'll see you around.